It was a battle in Marine Corps history for the strategic importance of its outcome, for its unrelenting bitterness, and for the lives it cost for a foot of ground. The men rose out of the earth and moved toward the hill. They clambered over its barren sides as enemy rifle and machine gun fires swept about them. Carefully, they worked toward the summit. Over the rim of the summit were hundreds of the enemy entrenched in caves. Less than 20 yards separated these Marines from the Japanese. Casualties were treated as the battle swirled about them. The story of Sugarloaf was indelibly written on the faces of the living and the dead. Driven off by massed enemy fire, the Marines came back for another assault. Sugarloaf Hill changed hands more than 11 times during the battle, costing the enemy an estimated 7 battalions. Its price in Marines was heavy, too. During the 10-day period, our losses numbered 2,662 killed and wounded. In addition, the 29th and 22nd Marines suffered the loss of 1,289 men due to exhaustion and sickness. Back on the summit, the men dug in and fought to hang on in the face of devastating fire. On 18 May, the 29th Marines stood on the hill once again. This time, they had come to stay. Rising to unbelievable heights of courage, they would not be dislodged. By the morning of 19 May, Sugarloaf Hill was ours. Even after the battle, the shifting ash of Sugarloaf continued to reveal the dead. These Marines were identified and removed for burial. The 4th Marines went into the lines and drove toward the Osato River. They crossed this barrier and entered the eastern suburbs of Naha. People called it the Rain of the Plums, and it lasted 16 days and nights. It had rained throughout the battles at the Asa River and at Sugarloaf Hill, filling foxholes with stagnant water, making rivers of roads, disrupting supply and communication. The rains closed all overland supply arteries. Amtraks were called into service to haul food, ammunition, and medical equipment over the reef fringing Okinawa's west coast. Having reached the north bank of the Osato in strength, the division was now able to enter Naha, the prize of the Ryukyus. Complete familiarity with the technique of street fighting, emphasized by Major General Shepard in the training phase, now paid off. Fire teams infiltrated into the maze of rubble, systematically destroying enemy pockets and clearing the city of snipers.
The veterans of the Solomons, the Marshalls, the Marianas, who composed the 6th Marine Division, had kept the image of the city before them for more than 25 days of intensive battle. Most of them had not seen a city since they left the Golden Gate, and Naha, with its population of 65,000, had been the brightest star on their horizon. But the city they found was a graveyard. Its people had vanished with its buildings. Nothing lived in this desert of stone. An occasional arch remained upright. An occasional derelict poked its way upward from the carpet of rubble. As though by miracle, the city's 2 Christian churches were still standing. Only the front of Naha's movie theater was recognizable. Naha's antiquated rail yards were wrecked beyond repair. Bridges no longer spanned the Osato Canal. The 6th Marine Division did not pause and captured Naha. Troops poured through its streets and out into the countryside to the southeast, where contact with the retreating enemy was being maintained.
When their Naha-Shuri-Yanabaru line became untenable, as a result of the penetration made by the division at the Asa, followed by its victory at Sugarloaf Hill, the Japanese were forced to withdraw southward. Once out of his elaborate coral fortresses, the enemy was subjected to devastating artillery, air, and naval bombardment. Much of his equipment, personnel, and combat efficiency was lost on the roads during his withdrawal to the south. The Japanese formed a new line based at Yeju Daki Plateau and Masato Ridge, where they were to make their last stand. General Ushijima decided, however, to maintain his garrison on Oruku Peninsula for the following reasons. 1. The enemy could deny us the use of Naha Harbor and Naha Airfield. The harbor was of particular value to the 10th Army because it meant shortened supply lines to the forces that would attack the Yeju-Daki-Masato line. 2. By holding Oruku Peninsula, the enemy could maintain a threat to the rear of 10th Army forces attacking the Yeju-Daki-Masato line. 3. Because Oruku Peninsula was heavily fortified, the enemy assumed that weeks of sanguinary effort would be required to reduce it. And this was consistent with General Ushijima's avowed purpose of waging a battle of attrition on Okinawa. To the 6th Marine Division fell the mission of capturing Oruku Peninsula. The enemy watched the division advance toward the Kokuba River and girded himself for an attack from the east. Major General Shepard waited for the defenders of Oruku to dispose themselves on the east, and then, masking his intentions, followed a plan that undoubtedly saved hundreds of Marine lives and cost the enemy his strategic peninsula in less than 2 weeks. At dawn of 4 June, while the enemy awaited an attack from the east, the 4th Marines came ashore on the western beaches of Oruku Peninsula. Having capitalized on the maneuverability of his amphibious force, and having achieved the element of surprise, General Shepard found the Oruku beaches lightly defended. The 4th Marines moved swiftly inland. As the light from the east grew brighter, supporting waves continued to come ashore to develop the beachhead. The surprised Japanese commander abandoned Naha Airfield and attempted to cover it only by fire. Moving southeastward from the beach, the 4th Marines reached Naha Airfield on 4 June and secured it on the 5th. This had been the enemy's principal ferry base for aircraft headed southward from Japan. With the airfield behind them, the 4th Marines pushed northward to the high ground which the enemy was defending. The 29th and 22nd Marines were committed from the east and west, respectively. Thus, by a series of rapid maneuvers, the formidable enemy garrison was reduced to a pocket under attack from 3 directions. Again, the enemy was defending a series of coordinated cave positions. Each fortified hill was overrun and liquidated, and then an adjacent hill came under fire prior to assault. The enemy struck back. Armed with a surplus of weapons, he inflicted casualties. Tanks were used to clear small valleys and ravines between hill forts. Troops moved quickly from hill to hill, for the low areas were covered by the enemy's automatic weapons. When an enemy hill was reached, the grim business of reducing each gun port and air vent by fire team action proceeded. Streams of fire poured into the ventilating system of a fort proved effective. Demolitions. In the hands of experts, TNT was a powerful weapon. It blew in vents, caved in gun ports, sealed entrances and exits. The enemy employed mines extensively, particularly in the coastal flats, roadbeds, and on the airfield. Trained personnel cleared these areas. In addition to standard anti-personnel and anti-vehicular mines, the enemy used improvised tomato can mines. These were filled with picric acid and iron and steel fragments.
Wow.
During the closing days of the Peninsula Campaign, prisoners were taken. This Korean, taken from Admiral Ota's command post, had amputated a section of his own leg and managed to live. Driven from the high ground and trapped in the weeds, the enemy had 2 alternatives: to die or to surrender. The majority chose to die. But many surrendered, and in numbers that were, until that time, unprecedented in Pacific warfare. Victory at Oruku Peninsula meant the opening of the port of Naha. Dredging operations and reconstruction began immediately with the collapse of enemy resistance across the water. This Bailey Bridge was a monument to the labors of the 6th Engineer Battalion. It was the longest Bailey Bridge ever constructed by the Marine Corps. It spanned Naha Ko, linking Naha with Oruku Peninsula, and had been constructed under fire. The Battle of Okinawa went on. 10th Army divisions attacking the Yeju-Daki-Misato line were making limited progress. The 6th Marine Division moved into the lines opposite Misato Ridge. With the 22nd Marines in assault, the attack jumped off on 17 June. Misato Ridge was a jagged pile of coral. The enemy, scarcely perceptible, defended it from caves and crevices. But by late afternoon of 17 June, the 22nd Marines had taken the ridge and were pushing beyond its reverse slope. Was the next hurdle. Now the Marines could smell the sea at the bottom of the island, the sea that spelled final victory on Okinawa. Behind a wall of fire, they pushed forward until they had crossed Kuwanga Ridge. The 4th and 29th Marines advanced across the last open field. Their lines moved relentlessly forward, pinning Japanese soldiers and Okinawan civilians against the sea. Flamethrower tanks set fire to the last patch of woods left to the enemy. On 21 June, the 6th Marine Division reached the cliff at the southernmost extremity of the island. But below the cliff, a disorganized and defiant enemy remained. Now the tremendous task of capturing or killing the remaining enemy and saving the thousands of helpless civilians began.
From this gargantuan cave, where they had taken refuge, the division evacuated more than 600 Okinawan civilians. Burned, starved, desperate people poured out of this cave at the bottom of the island after weeks of confinement. Most of them were too weak to walk. Most of them could not adjust their eyes to the sunlight after living in darkness. After receiving emergency first aid, refugees were taken by truck to the civilian compound north of Itoman. Those who were able went by foot. Every day, thousands of them poured into the civilian compound. The division handled 24,308 civilians on southern Okinawa alone. Each of them needed food and medical attention. Each of them needed to be screened and organized. Pitiful specters. This family typified the condition of the people. Medical personnel worked incessantly. There was little time for sentiment. There were not enough hours in the day to repair these broken people. The indomitable Okinawans won the respect of their conquerors. Stoically, they adjusted themselves to their terrible situation, helping themselves wherever possible. Not even the children cried. For the able-bodied males, there was work to be done. After they were screened by counterintelligence, the men were organized for labor on the roads and in the field.
Equally as spectacular and more significant was the haul of Japanese prisoners taken simultaneously from the bottom of the island. Surrender leaflets fired into the enemy's lines by artillery, coupled with other propaganda warfare methods, brought unprecedented results. The 6th Marine Division took 3,254 prisoners on Okinawa, the largest number ever taken by a Marine division in the Pacific War. The Okinawan people watched the miserable remnants of General Yoshijima's 32nd Army trot back to the prisoner of war stockade. The legend of Japanese invincibility was for them eternally broken. Docile and beaten, they climbed into trucks that bore them to the prisoner of war stockade near the division command post. Here they found plenty of silent, beaten company. Each man was searched by trained military police. Each man was interrogated by Japanese language officers, and the information received was checked by order of battle officers and forwarded to higher echelon. At the prisoner of war stockade, there were facial studies for the camera to record. Each face spoke without moving its lips. Each face was eloquent. They spoke of defeat, of despair, of disillusion. These were young faces and old, tired, bitter faces, sullen faces that wanted another chance. But all were the faces of a defeated people. The 6th Marine Division raised the Stars and Stripes for the second time on Okinawa Jima. They had raised the flag over the north. Now they raised it over the southernmost extremity of the strategic island.
The 6th Marine Division left the best part of itself on Okinawa Jima. But with its heroic dead, it left a record worthy of them and of the United States Marine Corps. The 6th Marine Division captured more than 75% of the total area of Okinawa Jima. It captured the two principal airfields on the island. This division captured the city of Naha, largest ever taken by the United States Marine Corps, and the first city to be wrested from the Japanese Empire. This was the division victorious at Mount Yahitaki that won the critical battle of the operation at Sugarloaf Hill. The 6th Marine Division killed 23,000 Japanese and captured more than 3,500, a record unsurpassed. The enemy called the 6th the Tiger Cub, called it the American division that could break up the battle for Okinawa. The enemy was right.
The 6th Marine Division suffered 8,227 battle casualties on Okinawa Jima. 1,622 of these lie buried near the East China Sea. These were men who died on the fringe of the atomic age. These were men who had fought the enemy from the beginning, in the jungles and on the atolls of the broad Pacific, and who had died fighting him on his own soil. These were men who never doubted and never knew the outcome. A day was set aside for those who fell. At a formal ceremony, they were honored by those of their fellows who had survived them. The chaplain prayed for them. The division commander humbly thanked them. Then, their friends bid them a last silent goodbye. Died for God and country.